Over the winter, I bought a DIY greenhouse kit from Costco. I chose the Palram Canopia Balance 8-foot series, and my model is specifically the 8-foot by 12-foot version for about $1,300. This video is not sponsored by anyone, and I'm making it entirely for free unless about 900 more subscribers magically materialize. I'll be doing a whole series about growing in this greenhouse, so if you're interested, make sure you are subscribed to my channel. This feels like a good day to record and publish a review for the greenhouse because we've just had a night and a day of pretty crazy winds, with gusts up to 65 miles per hour. I honestly didn't sleep very well last night because I was worried about the greenhouse. It sounded pretty apocalyptic with the wind howling outside, so stay tuned through my intro segment to see how the greenhouse held up through the storm and to get the deets of my review. Now that I've said deets, I hope it becomes a hopelessly uncool word and falls out of use. I should start by telling you about some features I've added that were not included in the base kit through Costco. In the base kit, both roof vents were manual, and I've upgraded them to automatic. You can see them both opening there in the background. There was no louvered wall vent included in the base kit. That's a retrofit that I included while I was assembling the greenhouse. The base kit also doesn't include a foundation, and my greenhouse is on a foundation. Aside from those things, this review is for what you get out of the box with the 8x12 unit. The greenhouse base is solid steel, but the rest of the frame is aluminum channel. Corner pieces and braces are plastic. The panels are very thin polycarbonate, but when I was pricing it out, what it would cost me to build a greenhouse to these dimensions from scratch, just the skin would have been more than the whole kit. So even though I'm not thrilled with the thickness of the polycarbonate panels, I still think this kit is an amazing value for the price. I feel like they were going for a compromise between transparency and insulation with this kit. The roof panels are double wall polycarbonate while the walls are single thickness. It feels like the roof panels should be more durable in wind because of their corrugated construction. But when the wind did blow out a panel shortly after I put it together, it was one from the roof. I believe this was because they've shaped the wall panels in a way that adds rigidity along two axes, while the roof panels still have a lot of flex on their center axis. The wall panels also fit more tightly in their aluminum channels due to the shaping, so they're held more securely than the roof panels. The wind that knocked out a single panel was unusually strong for my area, and I haven't seen it happen again since then. It was very easy to put the fallen panel back and re-secure it. I almost lost the same panel again in last night's windstorm, but it didn't completely dislodge and popped right back into place. The kit arrived in 2 boxes, one containing the frame members and most of the hardware, and one containing the polycarbonate panels. Oh, wind is vibrating my camera a little bit. Still windy. Everything is pre-drilled and ready to assemble once the site is ready. Palram recommends assembling the kit on a foundation, and I can absolutely see why. There are several assembly steps where things are very wobbly, and if I had been working on an uneven surface, I don't think I would have come away with what's left of my sanity. You will probably have some screws, nuts, and bolts left over when you're finished, and that's okay. I'm pretty sure they included extra, and I'm grateful because I lost a few in my lawn. I couldn't find them with a magnet because they're not even steel, they're aluminum to prevent corrosion. I also had leftover pieces because I built in the extra vent and chose not to use the manual vent openers. The product description says that 2 people working together should expect to spend 4 to 12 hours putting the greenhouse together. And that feels accurate. I was able to complete all but 2 steps by myself. And for those 2 steps, I was able to call on my marital partners for help. It took me 2 solid 10 to 12 hour days to put together, not including the foundation. So I can see how it might have taken me 1 day if I'd had more help. While I was putting the greenhouse together, I was very skeptical that I would end up with a strong, rigid structure. So if you buy this greenhouse and you feel that way during assembly, I understand, it's understandable. The frame is engineered to be reinforced by its own structure. So when the structure hasn't been fully assembled, it's pretty floppy. Once I had everything put together, I was happy with how rigid it was, and still is. I can see that I didn't get things completely squared up, and that might have something to do with the wind being able to blow out the roof panel. If you're assembling one of these on your own, you should probably check for square and level frequently rather than relying on the frame to square itself up like I did. My biggest complaint while I was working was that the hardware was poorly labeled or often unlabeled, and that it was difficult for me to find the parts labels on many of the frame pieces. If you're like me, you'll have no prior experience putting together an aluminum greenhouse frame, and you'll have no idea which part is which. Those labels are essential, and I could have saved 2 full hours if they had been labeled better. There were a few times that I almost lost it because I was missing a piece, but then I found it. There are literally hundreds of individual pieces to keep track of, and it gets very frustrating for noobs like me. Luckily, the more pieces you put together, the smaller your pile of poorly labeled pieces gets, and the less time you have to spend looking for your next piece. Based on my personal experience putting this together, if you can find someone who's willing to assemble this for you for less than $300 and you have the money handy, you should totally pay them to do it for you. If you absolutely must do this yourself, budget at least 2 days. Take your time. Double check everything to ensure that it's square and level. Do not leave the assembly incomplete and take a break for a day or two. Until it's completely assembled, it will be very vulnerable to wind, and a strong enough gust could twist your aluminum frame. I mean, think about it. A wall without the roof in place is just a big floppy plastic sail. Try to do your assembling on calm days with minimal breeze, and check your forecast before you start to make sure that those conditions will last a couple of days for you. I was almost put off buying this greenhouse by the reviews despite its incredibly low price. It seemed like people either loved this greenhouse or hated it, with very little in between. One pattern I noticed was that a lot of the people who left negative reviews did not build their greenhouses on a foundation. I can totally see why this would have had a terrible experience without a foundation to build on. There were also a few reviews that were critical of how the doors were held open and closed. Now that I've built the greenhouse, I can see what they mean. One door latches closed to the frame at the top and the bottom, but the other door only latches closed at the center. On a calm day, this is fine, but if it's windy, the looser door can blow open. There is a lock loop for a padlock built into the door mechanism, and I recommend that if you have this greenhouse, you always keep it locked or wired shut to prevent the wind blowing the door open when you're not around. When the doors are open, they're kept open by magnets at their bottoms that stick to the stainless steel base. The magnets are all that holds the doors open, so a strong wind can dislodge them and either leave them swinging or slam them shut. I know that it's common practice with greenhouses to keep the door open on warmer days to help ventilate things, but this may be a greenhouse you shouldn't leave unsupervised with the doors open. If keeping the doors open is important to you, you'll need to find a system for holding them open more securely. There were some perfectly legit reviews where people complained that the assembly instructions were entirely pictures and pictograms with virtually no written instructions, and I 100% agree with this criticism. I understand that they were trying to keep from writing a several hundred-page book while marketing a product for sale in several languages, but more written instructions would have been very helpful. I had to chuckle because of how often they encouraged calling customer service for help throughout the instruction book. It felt like every few pages they repeated that and their customer service number. So it felt like they expected assembly to be difficult and they knew the instructions were pretty sparse. If you're assembling this greenhouse, read through the entire set of instructions before you begin, even though it is overwhelming. The parts they make an effort to actually give written instructions for will save you headaches later. If you have experience following Lego directions, It will actually be very helpful. Just like with building Lego, following directions, take things piece by piece and try not to skip ahead. It's helpful to keep things organized and to keep your similar pieces with each other. Sometimes I had to carefully compare pieces to their illustrations, just like with some Lego directions. Some of the steps are weird for good reasons, mostly to assure maximum support for the structure while you're putting it together, but it won't necessarily make sense at the time. Here's a view of my greenhouse having weathered last night's windstorm. We're expecting more winds and a thunderstorm later today, but it probably won't be as bad as last night's. I'm pleasantly surprised by how well the greenhouse made it through the storm, and that's contributed to a positive opinion of this greenhouse. I'm probably going to build in something to help firm up the roof panels so I don't need to worry as much about them popping out in high winds, but last night's wind didn't fully dislodge any. The site preparation directions for this greenhouse strongly recommend building on a foundation of some sort. They say you can build directly on soil, but it's not recommended, and I guess they're the manufacturer and they know their product, but from personal experience, I say that a foundation is non-negotiable. It needs to be level, and it needs to be square. There needs to be a way to attach the greenhouse to it so the wind won't blow it away. I used pressure-treated 4x4s screwed together with 6-inch deck screws and anchored to the ground with 4-foot-long rebar stakes. The entire greenhouse weighs less than I do, so anchoring it firmly to the ground is super important. And as I said earlier, having a level, square surface to build on will help save your sanity. The 8x8 greenhouse has one roof vent, the 8x12 has two, the 8x16 has three, and the 8x20 has four. These vents are, in my opinion, the very least you can get away with. If it's at all possible, build additional ventilation into your greenhouse. If this is something you plan to use over the summer months, you'll probably want to put some shade cloth over it to help keep it cool. One plus side to using a wooden foundation is that I can screw eye bolts into it to help secure my shade cloth. I'm going to do a whole video on keeping greenhouses cool because I think that's actually more important than heating them. This is not a year-round greenhouse. Don't get this greenhouse if you want to grow tropical plants in it in December and you live in a temperate climate. At least don't get it if you don't want to spend a fortune heating it. I'm going to experiment with additional insulation options like horticultural bubble wrap and see how far I can extend my seasons with this, but it's something that should only be considered a season extender. The single layer polycarbonate just doesn't give you enough insulation by itself to keep things warm at night year round. All of that being said, my final opinion is that this is an excellent starter greenhouse for extending the growing season and puttering around in. I'm super excited to finish installing a floor with good drainage, to put in some shelves, and to build a potting bench. I feel like my add-ons have added a lot of value to the greenhouse for me. Converting from manual to automatic vent openers feels like it's something I could have done at any time, but if you want to put in extra vents, that's something you should plan on in advance because it's a lot harder to change the fully assembled greenhouse than it is to swap out a panel for a vent while you're building it. If you're considering getting a greenhouse kit, you could do worse than this one. There are way better greenhouse kits on the market, but they also cost a lot more. If you have $7,000 to $10,000 burning a hole in your pocket, do get a better one. This feels like the best value per square foot that I've seen anywhere so far.